That was giving you an option to explain what happened. Just like that.
Hey, Danielle, looks like we got one. Hopefully it'll give everybody about 5 minutes to get onto their email and get new links. All right, guys, we'll get started here. I think we have it all worked out now, so let me share the screen with you guys in Zoom and we'll go from there.
It was just loading.
Your screen sharing stop is external display. Okay. Try this again.
Just I might have closed it.
Okay, guys, are you guys seeing the screen now with the slides on it? Danielle, can you see that?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. How about you guys? Is that bright enough? It's pretty dim, I know. All right, so tonight, guys, we'll try and get through all of these as quickly as we can. And we'll keep moving through here. So tonight on the topics, we're going to cover the emergency medical system, different components of it, everywhere from dispatch to ER to all of that. Your roles and responsibility as an EMT and the research and some other special issues that we'll have to go over with here, okay? It takes will be about an hour on these slides. So we'll keep moving through it though. So how it began, guys, we actually are a fairly old service as far as when we started. We started back in 1970s during the French Wars. The soldiers were cared for at the scene by physicians, and that's the earliest documented that we have. During the Civil War, Clara Barton began emergency services and later established, so she's the Red Cross lady when it started that way. World War II, or excuse me, World War I is when we moved to a volunteer ambulance corps. It was the same thing. They would go out, and what we found is we could save a lot of military lives by taking the services of emergency medical care out to them in the field. From there, we moved into the Korean and Vietnam War, and this is where we first started to see helicopters too, was during this time of the war. So they also had, you guys have all seen MASH, right? So that's what this is too. We were just an extension of that, that they would treat trauma and things like that, but it happened out in the field. It's kind of how we began with it. A lot of what you guys will find in EMS that is come from war. The only good thing to me, especially with everything that's happening now that came out of Afghanistan and Iraq, is we did have a lot of trauma patients, and then it changed many of our protocols and our way of treating patients. So what you will find is when we have a lot of advances in EMS, it's usually tied to some sort of a war or conflict. Just that's where we have the most concentrated patients that we can treat, especially with trauma. So the non-military ambulance services, they started around the 1900s. They were only transport with little or no emergency care. So they'd literally throw you in the back of a buggy and take you away. to the hospital. The sad, or whatever you want to look at it too, though, is most of them were mortuaries. So you either made it to the hospital or you went back home with them. That's literally who started it. It was mortuaries. We didn't see it in our small rural communities until the 1940s. And even then, it was the same thing. Like I said, under the local undertaker or fire services was with it. We were tied to the fire services a lot as you look at our history and the way we go through it, just because they're both a deemed essential service that you have to have for your community. And so you look at the large urban areas, the way they get their funding is from fire. So we tie those two together with it. But we needed some kind of organization system for care and for training and getting some kind of training, right? Until the last 20 years with the National Registry, it's been the states have had control, and even at that level, many medical directors and things have had different control and went through it that way. So for our EMS today, after the 1966, the Department of Transport changed for developing EMS standards. Same thing, guys. Where were a lot of our accidents? The old cars and stuff didn't have the safety features and things that we did. So these guys set up some systems so that we had some kind of a standard to it. But even at that, the states could make variances to it on their own. In 1970, the National Registry of EMTs, or the NREMT, which you guys will be through this class, was when it was started. Most of the states, though, it's been in the last 10 or 15 years before the states jumped on board. And so the NREMT now is pretty well the gold standard for emergency care. They're the ones that set the policies. The thing that I'll throw with this too, guys, though, is when you guys get running in the field, just know that there is more to it than just this. So the NREMT is the basics, is the bottom line. You have to meet that, but a lot of states have added on to it. They want you guys to be able to do more things, especially states like Utah that have a large rural area that you guys are going to be responding from. So when you guys get to do some of the ride-alongs with the ambulances and stuff, just know that the basics, they are going to be doing stuff that for you guys, you'll have to call medical control and do some of those things because this class is taught to the NREMT, and then the state and local agencies add on to it. Okay. 1973, the National Emergency Medical Services Act was passed by Congress. That just gave us some more recognition, and then the other thing it did is give us funding too. Still, though, our National Highway Transportation and Safety, the NHTSA, is the one that still govern us. We still stayed underneath their umbrella. So they're the ones that do the regulations of policies. But like we said, each state establishes their own laws, a lead EMS agency. So for us, it's the Bureau of Emergency Medical Services. They're the ones that do the state-specific policies and procedures. And then also too, they're the resource management. So it's centralized. That's where all of our treatment and transport resources come from. And they're also the ones that give us the licensor too in the state. Human resources and training. So we have to make sure that EMS personnel are trained and certified to a minimum standard. So just remember that, guys. Like I said, I've already hit on this, but this is going to be a minimal standard. As we go through, you'll add more and more onto it as you guys go through. Okay. Transportation, provide safe and reliable transportation. Right now, guys, that is the most dangerous place that you guys will have, is when you go to and from a scene, is where most of our injuries are happening now. It's just people don't pay attention. If you guys get in your new cars now too, and you get a cop or fire truck or something come up behind you, most of the time you don't even hear their lights or sirens, right? They're soundproofed, and that's just the most dangerous for us. Which is why you see a lot of ambulances now will not run lights and sirens going back and forth, just because it creates more of a hazard than it helps. So facilities, you guys know this part of it. Facilities, you're going to transport to the closest appropriate facility. Now, for us in rural, we don't have a lot of options other than Sanpete Valley or Central Valley for here, or for you guys in Price, you've just got Castleview Hospital. But where this comes into, and you'll see some test questions too along that lines for the National Registry, will be, let's say you have a stroke patient and you have a level 4 trauma center that's 5 minutes away from you, and a level 1 trauma center that's 10 minutes away from you. Which one does it need to go to? And in that case, it's you go the further distance to that level 1 trauma center. So you will see that in test questions, not only in this class, but you will see it on the registry too. What's that?
What level are we here?
We're a level 4 at Sanpete Valley, and so is Central Valley. And for you guys over in Price, I am not sure Castleview. I want to say it's a level 4 too. Google, thank you. We're gonna Google it and make sure. Communications, guys, for you that have been around fire services or any of that for any amount of time, the 10 code is dead. We don't use 1023, 10. That shows you how long I've been in this, but so now we just went to a universal language, dispatch to ambulance, ambulance to ambulance. All it's saying is we're just saying, okay, we're en route, or we're at the patient, or we're leaving to the hospital. There used to be a 10 code for all of that. That's dead. So if you see that in the test questions, no, that's not it. Okay. Same thing though, the other thing that came with the higher highway standards is no matter where you're at in the US, 911 will be your universal number too. Public information and education too. The public does have a role in EMS too, right? And they have a right to access it too. The other thing we try and do a lot with it is like the car seat stuff, go out to schools or whatever and do some training that way too with them. So that helps with us too. Medical direction for you guys, if you have any questions and want to talk to our medical direction for this class, is Dr. Wilden out of Gunnison Valley. He's my medical director that I use for the classes. He's the one that ultimately for all of Sanpete County is the medical director. So he's the one that signs off and says, hey, you can do this, you can do that. No, we're not going to allow that. So for our class, though, if you ever need to get a hold of him, it's GJ Wilden at Gunnison Valley. Trauma systems. We developed the triage, transport, and treatment protocols. They're the ones that stated that we have to have that. They've laxed up on that. We used to have the SALT, and then we went to another triage method, and we'll hit on more of that too as we get into later lessons. And then evaluation. So we have to have a effective QA. If you guys, and I promise you this, I do it after every call, take a minute. Something always went right and something always could have been done better. The moment you guys look at a call and say, oh, we couldn't have done anything different or better than that, you're dangerous. Okay. There's always something that could be done better. And there's always, on the plus side, there's always something that went right too. All right. Components of the emergency medical system. So our dispatchers, guys, we need these guys are awesome. There's a lot of times where you'll get cussed and you'll cuss them, I know, because we all do it, but just realize that they can only pass on the information that was given to them. And there's some times that the information that was given to them is junk. And so garbage in, garbage out, but they do the best they can. And remember too, with these guys, there's a lot of the times if we don't call in and on scene, they're wondering that's their responsibility to make sure that we're safe too. And if something happens, to send more resources. The EMS responders, that's you guys, our EMTs and things that come on the scenes, and then our emergency department or hospital. Your doctors, your nurses, our docs and nurses around here are great. The ones that I deal with at Castleview too have been really well to work with that way too. But we also have some specialized care facilities for us. So for us here, our trauma centers, we only have 3 trauma centers in Utah right now, at level 1 trauma centers. Utah Valley, or Utah Regional Medical Center, IMC in Murray, and U of U are our level 1 trauma centers. And we are also too, guys, the fact that we have the U of U and a burn center here in Utah is huge, because it's one of the ones, I mean, they bring them in from Idaho, Montana, and Nevada. I mean, it's, there's just not a lot of them around. The other thing we have too is we have primary children's, which is a huge asset to us too. We have cardiac centers. So that's your cath labs. Many hospitals that we have in this area, Payson is one, Utah Valley is one, Timpanogos is one, and then Cedar City and Dixie Regional are also some cardiac and stroke centers. Usually if they have one, they have the other. But stroke centers, even Sanpete Valley and Castleview and Central Valley over in Nephi, our stroke center, they have the drugs and things to give for stroke, the clot busting drugs and things. The only thing you'll find with those though is they are a stroke center, but they don't hold stroke patients. So they'll give them the drugs, they'll do the treatment, and then we ship them up to your level 1 trauma centers usually. So some things to think about, guys, too. We've kind of hit on that. The first one, what are medical services available in your community? For you guys over in Price and on Zoom, so we can make sure you're listening here. What are some medical services that you guys have over there that are unique to your area that you can think of? You guys are quiet out there.
We have the new urgent care and stuff like that, but they're not open 24/7.
And then the other one that I can think of too is your Emory Medical Center. They'll actually receive ambulances and things that way too. Then urgent cares are great, and you'll see them a lot more. Same thing, we don't even have one of those here. The closest urgent care we have is in Payson, I believe. What's some of the capabilities though of, do you guys know how many beds our hospital has over here at Sanpete Valley? How many ER beds? We have 4 and 2 traumas. So we have the capability of 6. Okay. Castleview, I believe they have 8. Don't quote me on that. But when we went down there the other day, I believe they have 8. So if we have a mass casualty, are we going to overrun our hospital? Oh yeah, in a hurry, in a hurry. So the other thing that to think about too is what ambulances, how many ambulances do we have in our area? For us in the North Sanpete ambulance and north of Ephraim, we only have 3. So if we have a mass casualty and we pull Ephraim's 3 or our 3, Ephraim has 2, and we can do 4 if we pull out the backup rig if it's running. Ephraim can do 2, so there's 6. Manti can do 2, there's 8. So really in our area, and if we pull clear into Gunnison, we can pull 10 ambulances is it. What's that? So we have one in Moroni, one in Fairview, and one in Mount Pleasant. Yeah. Oh, they're on.
In the process of it.
Oh, there you go. Liz did some research for you guys too. Just heads up for you guys at Castleview. They're in the process of they're determining a trauma level, but currently are not registered at all. Liz just called over and talked to them just to get some information for you guys. And then you guys too, the possibility of transporting a patient not equipped to handle the problem. It delays patient care. That's what it comes down to, is if they don't need, I mean, it's even here, if we're bringing in a bad trauma, we got to go to our closest. So we go to Sanpete Valley, but we need to be calling in Life Flight. We need to be calling in other resources, whatever we can do, because they need to go north. So accessing the 911 system, right? We have a patient, citizen calls 911, goes to the emergency dispatcher. We get paged out, EMTs arrive, we go to the hospital, and then some kind of allied health, meaning that's your definitive care, whether it's Sanpete Valley, Utah Valley, wherever we're going that way, okay? The thing that I like about this slide is it shows you how many steps. So on a normal call, if everything, it's just a basic EMS call, nothing too serious. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different times this patient information is getting passed on, and something always gets lost every time you pass it on. So what the patient tells us or dispatch, by the time we get to the ER, maybe there's a lot of information lost. So just understand that it's not a perfect system, but there's a lot of steps and handoff information too. So most available in most communities. I can't think of where it wouldn't be in the state of Utah, at least, as long as we have phone service there. The other nice thing too, though, guys, is enhanced 911. It gives your emergency call number and a location for the landline on the phones. And Centricom is one of those for here. So you guys have an enhanced 911. Also too, most of your like Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, if you call in 911 to them, it also sends that dispatch center their coordinates, so they can hone in and find you that way too. Emergency medical dispatchers, kind of their role in it. They can provide instructions to the callers on how to provide emergency care until EMS arrives. They're really great and a huge tool on early access and initiation of CPR. Just like we talked though in the CPR classes, guys, it's hard. You will hear these guys in the background on CPR calls begging somebody to start CPR because they know the importance of it, and they just can't or won't. And a lot of the times they get scared. CPR is a fairly violent process, and it scares them. Okay. But they're our first line, right? They're the ones that start gathering up the information. And if you guys look at these, they have, and if you go down to our dispatch center here, 4 or 5 screens. They're not for our area and Castleview too, or Carbon County too. They're doing police, they're doing fire, they're doing any other calls that come in. And most of the time in our small rural areas, day shift, there may be 2 of them there, but a lot of the times there's just 1 of them there trying to handle all of it. So
Does any of this information get sent to the hospital, or is it all coming through?
it all comes through us. Yep. They can call. No, it would be nice just to send to it, but they're linked. They're not linked right now. You can call them. So the question was asked is if any of this information that they have gets sent to the hospital, and it does not as of right now. You can call and ask them, like if we have a really bad something or another, you can yell up to the driver, say, hey, tell the hospital, have dispatch, call the hospital, tell them we're coming in with a level 1 trauma with severe bleeding and blah, 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 ETA. They'll pass that on, but as far as anything else, they don't. So critical decision-making, guys, this is, it's really important for you guys. That's what it all comes down to. It really is critical thinking all the way through it. You got to gather the scene information and patient assessment and other sources, whether it's medications, any other things that you guys are seeing on the scene. And we take all of that and we make a decision regarding treatment and transport of these guys. Especially medical. Everybody that does EMS wants trauma, or usually loves the trauma. We want the blood, we want the whatever. And when we're dealing with EMS though, most of ours are medical, and those are the ones where you really got to look at that scene, look at the patient and what our assessment's telling us and things that way to make it critical. Trauma is fairly easy as far as critical thinking. Find the bleeding, stop it. We're going to give them a little fluid for your advance and make sure they have an open airway. Also,
Hey, Brandon,
yes.
sorry to interrupt. I have the book and I'm just trying to follow along. Where are we at? Your screen just shows the first slide.
Oh, it's not showing you, you're not seeing critical decision making?
No, I've been trying to follow along in the book and I can't.
Okay.
I lost where we're at.
No,
Sorry.
you're good. You're good. Let me see why it won't. How about now, Danielle? Are you seeing critical
Decision making.
decision making?
I am. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Sorry about that.
You'll have to tell us if it doesn't change again.
Okay, thank you.
When information is not enough, you guys are going to have to ask more questions, and sometimes you're going to have to learn how to ask the question the right way. Because a lot of the times the patient may not know what you're trying to ask them or not willing to give you the information. If it's a drug related or crime scene or some of that, they're not going to want to give a lot of information to you guys. But just ask the right question and then also perform additional examinations, right? If you're questioning it, a lot of the times if you're missing something, what I always do for me is start back at the head to toe. Okay, let's go down and check and make sure where you got airway, drugs, medication, ask any of those questions. You need to do that way too. Did it switch for you, Danielle?
It did. Thank you.
So some examples, should you take your patient to the closest hospital or the more distant specialty hospital? We've already hit on that one, right? If they need the specialty hospital, within reason, right? Like for us, if we're having a stroke, I'm not going to Utah Valley with them and bypassing Sanpete Valley. That's 15 minutes away to give them that drugs. So, I mean, you got to use your judgment that way too. And then two, will this medication help the patient's current condition or could it make it worse, right? Every medication has a desired side effect and then an unintended or a contraindication that it can cause, okay? One that will hit hard on that way for you guys is nitro. Yeah, nitroglycerin. That'll be one that you guys can give. And we'll hit more on that one in drugs, but just some things to think about as we're doing it too. And it can be the same thing as, okay, as moving this patient, we'll talk about rapid moves or urgent moves, you know, do we need to move them now or can we take the time to protect some spinal stuff, or is their safety or our safety in danger? Come on, play with me. So some levels of EMS training. This is the NREMT. This is the ones that we recognize too. So there's 4 general training and certifications that come and may vary from place to place. So emergency medical responder or your EMR, they deal on a lot with trauma, not so much medical, and can help that way with CPR and things that way. Hopefully by the time you guys are all done, you'll be at the next level though. That's the EMT. We used to call it basic, but we've been told to kind of get rid of that too. So you'll hear it still though, but for you guys, it's the EMT. You have some basic life support. You guys, the thing that we teach you is airway though. Hopefully you guys are the kings of the airway by the time we're done with this. Advanced or your AEMTs in this area and Carbon County, we use those a lot. In fact, in the state of Utah, in your rural areas, most of them are the highest level is an AEMT. They can give a lot of drugs, narcotics, things like that. So that's your next level. And then paramedic is the highest level, do innovations, a lot of cardiac stuff. So advanced are usually drugs, and then paramedics all about cardiac, and as far as what we can do to treat that. Okay, roles and responsibilities of an EMT. Know this one, say it every time you come in. Is the scene safe? Is it safe for you? First of all, is it safe for the crew? And then we worry about the patient, and then we worry about bystander. Scene safety, scene safety, scene safety. Always, always, always. You guys will be working with other public safety professionals. Most of the people that get into public safety are alpha personalities, right? So sometimes it can be a struggle that way because you'll butt heads with them, but try and gain a rapport with them, whether it's law enforcement, fire departments, whatever you got to do that way, because you will be working with them too. Patient assessment and care. So you guys are the ones that will do the assessment and responsible for care. Lifting and moving. What's the #1 debilitating injury for a firefighter or EMT that kicks them out of the service? Back injuries. Okay. So that one, and I'm a stickler for that when we start the hands-on. I just don't want to see you guys learn bad habits, because that muscle memory will stick. We're also responsible for the transport of these too. Transfer of care, and then patient advocacy, right? That's a big one for you guys, is basics, is that patient advocacy. Don't be afraid to step in and argue if you feel like it needs to have some kind of different patient care. We're not going to do the think about it just to try and make up some time, guys. So some personal traits of a good EMT. Ability to lift and carry equipment and patients up to 125 pounds. You guys know what the average patient size is that we're transporting now, weight wise? Yeah, about 285 to 310. Okay, so lifting, that's where, but as we say lifting, that's why a lot of ambulances have the power lift cots now, the power loads, stair chairs, all of that kind of stuff too. Good eyesight, distance and reading, aware of any problems with color vision, and then good communications, whether it's oral or written. The written one, guys, and we'll hit on it too more and more, I promise you, but document, document, document. If it was said, if it was done, it better be written.
You can't write too much.
No, you can't write too much. And with the new computerized reports, you have all the space in the world you want to put it on there. So some personal traits of a good EMT: pleasant, sincere, cooperative, resourceful. You guys are coming and seeing these guys in the worst day of their life. So if you can be pleasant and sincere, if you're having an off day and you just can't be that, then it may be the time to step back and say, you've got lead and I'll do whatever you tell me to, but let somebody else do it that way if you need. But be sincere with these patients. They can tell whether you really care or not, and nothing will turn them off and have them shut down to being helpful to you guys. Or they also have to trust you with their personal information. And if they don't feel like you're sincere, they're not going to want to give you any information either. And then resourceful. I watch a lot of World War II documentaries and things, and the one thing that I've taken from them too is no plan survives first contact, right? So we can have the best plan in the world, and as soon as we touch the patient, it all goes to crap. So just know that way, be resourceful, whether it's using so like we had one down at the mine, down at Sufco, that the guy, the long well caved, and I know for you guys that not in mining, but for you guys in the mine, this will make sense. We'd went 250 feet. The long well finally did cave behind it. It picked up a guy that weighed 145 pounds and flung him 40 feet down the face of the long well. and there's great big steel, everything on it's heavy and still, and he hit shoulders, knees, back, head, just tumbled him down this long old face. And we used a 5-gallon bucket as a splint on our stretcher to hold up his knee, because that was what was comfortable. So use what you guys need to make it possible too. Personal traits too. Professional appearance inspires confidence, right? If you're running with an agency and you're on call, try and have a shirt, something so you look a little more professional. I'm the worst at that, because a lot of times if I'm on call, I'm out on the farm or whatever, and you might get me in mud boots and dirty as can be, but that's where I'm at. Okay. You guys also need to be a self-starter. You're out on your own. There's 3 of you there, and nobody's holding your hand and telling you what to do. So you got to jump in, start your treatment, and run with it. Emotionally stable. We have a whole chapter on this too, but you're going to see some calls that aren't pretty. You're going to deal with some things that aren't very easy to deal with, and help keep that emotional stability. And more what we're saying here is be able to recognize that you need help. We have critical debriefing teams. We have lots of things to help you that way to keep your emotional stability. That one is a big one, and we'll bring in some help that way too. Able to lead, right? Most of us are alphas though too. If we're doing this, a lot of us want to step in and want to be the lead. I could care less. I just want to go do patient care. Neat and clean, and then of good moral character and respectful to others. We had a lady that used to run with us here in Moroni that also ran in Vernal and did out on the reservation up there too. And that one was one that they really had to hit on, is that you've got to be respectful of their culture and of what they're doing too. And here we have a large Hispanic population. We also have Polynesian, and just be respectful of what their culture is and what they do too. Like for her, up on the reservation as a female, they couldn't go into the house unless an elder was there or the man of the house. Otherwise, they literally would bring the patient out the door to them, regardless of what condition they were in. So there's just be respectful of that. And control of personal habits. Take a bath, wear deodorant, do some of that stuff, right? Just be presentable that way. Able to listen to others too. And this is a hard one for me, and I struggle too. Non-judgmental and fair. There's some times on a rec where the one that I'll share is I was actually up at Skyline on graveyards, and I got called out from the mine to a wreck up at Electric Lake. And get up there to the wreck, mom and 2 kids, or 3 kids, no 2, mom and 2 kids and 2 other males rolled off. And mom, we found one baby. I say baby, she was 5 years old. And then we found another one that was 7 years old, but they found him underneath the truck in the water. And when we took mom to the car, we thought we'd put mom and girl in the ambulance together. And she looked at her daughter and said it should have been her instead of the little boy. And it was all I could do not to just throttle that mother, because she was drunk as a skunk too. So there will be some of those guys that you just bite your tongue, do the patient treatment, understand that you don't know what they're going through. And it's hard. It is hard. Okay, come on, play with me. Education. So for you guys, know this part of it too, and I would write this down and just memorize this. You guys have got to stay up to date on your knowledge and skills. So for us, you have a 2-year certification, and your CME, your CEC hours, you have to have 48 hours every 2 years. So like for us in North Stampede, we do 2 trainings a month. So those count for it. We also have conferences. So there's a big one in Provo and there's a big one in St. George.
And then every so many years they do one down in Vegas.
Yeah, and then the
They'll do one
EMS
in
Expo
Nashville, or
does,
not
they do it
Nashville.
every year, but it's it moves from Vegas,
New
New Orleans,
Mhm.
Nashville. Anyway, that one moves. But you can go and do seminars and lectures that way. There's stuff online too that you can do.
It's super easy to keep your hours up.
It sounds like you do it and you have to show it.
Show them,
Mhm.
yeah, just make sure and keep the document. Same thing, make sure you get, if you do the conferences, keep your certificate that says that how many hours it was, and just scan that into the NRMT site when you do your hours. Harmony and Tracy for our service are really good to, if you've got a web or a NRMT, if you affiliate with them, they'll automatically put in your hours and documentation with it too, so it's done for you. So if you're going to run with the service, make sure and get affiliated with them so that their hours will go in with it. So for you guys, where will you be providing service? Is it ambulance? We have a few fire guys that are doing it too. Urban, and for us at the mine, we're in industrial, and then we're all volunteering, right? So know each service has their own policies and procedures, so learn those too. And then the volunteering part of it too. Just because you're a volunteer doesn't mean you're not a professional though. So I know a lot of the times if you go up north, some of those guys get a little, I hate to say it, but snooty sometimes, and you can do the same treatment that they can. Okay? And in fact, in the rural area, we actually get more experience a lot of the times because they're in the nearest hospitals 5 or 10 minutes away from them. We can be 30, 40, up to an hour and a half away from the nearest hospital.
Can I ask a question?
Uh-huh.
What are the rules here as far as my friend was telling me, her husband's in EMT, and they're not allowed to respond unless they're on call. Here, I know, a fire department sometimes will show up and look and you fix somebody or whatever, you know, 'cause
Mm.
they'll ask us to, but we're such a small community, like if I get a call, I can't store, but I'm not on call.
Oh yeah, they still say to come over
In
and help.
fact, a lot of times they appreciate that because you are literally the closest person. Yeah.
Yeah, so
And it's
for,
like you said, you can hear different pages and you know that it'll be a CPR run, and the more people that are available to interchange, the better. The more people that are there to help lift a patient is helpful. So a lot of times that's very much appreciated.
yeah,
Mhm. Yeah, I mean,
just
they
know
fill
that if
the,
you,
they have to fill the schedule because we have to run under a certain guideline as well. So they have to have the schedule filled, but that doesn't mean you're not able to respond as well.
you just may not be the one riding to the hospital with
Mhm.
them.
Mhm.
That would be the only thing for us here. And just too, we'll hit on this on the Good Samaritan laws and some of that stuff too, but on the basic, as long as you stay within the basic skills, you can do them anywhere in the state. Where you can get in trouble is if you move on and do your advanced or your paramedic. I can't do any of my skills outside of my service area. Okay, I can do any basics, but I can't start an IV. I can't do any medications. I can't do any of that outside of my service area or jurisdiction. So NREMT, guys, it's been hard for us to roll over to this, but it's been really, really good now too because of that reciprocity. Any state, once you're done with this class, if you get your NRMT, you can go to Nevada, Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, all of those, you pay their state fees. It's usually like $50 and you can get a license to practice in their state. So it's beneficial for applying for employment that way too, just because you're just done, it's versatile. Okay, I think the only state that doesn't recognize it right now is one of them back east. I know everything, Nevada, Colorado, Oregon, all of those around here recognize it that way. Okay. Quality improvement though, guys, we've hit on this one, right? Plans to develop our deficiencies and improve performance. Do it after every call. So the other thing too, though, is we have a quality improvement process too, and everyone in the organization has a role. Document clear and carefully written documentation. And then become involved in the process too. So for us, Tracy is our quality assurance officer. He reviews the calls and will send stuff back to you too. Take a minute too and do a debriefing as a crew, sit down and talk about what went good, what went bad. And then the one that we miss a lot of the times too, is just ask the patients, hey, is there something, especially for us in the small community, when they get home, hey, is there something that you guys thought we could have done differently, maybe, you know what I mean? Or what did you think went well? And a lot of the times you'll find too, they'll seek you out and tell you something too. Hospital staff too. We can tell them and they can tell us things that we saw that went well and things that we thought could be improved. Maintaining your equipment. This one is hard. And this one at the mine ticks me off because people keep stealing stuff out of our mine ambulance. But if you use it on the call, make sure it gets back in. And then continuing your education, right? Policies and procedures change faster than a textbook can. So like this textbook just came out last year. It was outdated probably by the time it was printed, as far as what the new medical research is saying. Gyms, different EMS websites will have a lot of your up-to-date information that way. Your medical direction, okay. All of our stuff is performed and we're acting underneath his licensure. And so he's the one that gives us what we can and can't do. And ultimately, if something goes wrong, he's the one that gets to answer for it and can come back and get us to answer for it too.
It's gonna be different for every different department.
A lot of the counties have tried to go and get it at least to where the county services are all under the same, even like Utah County. And some of those have all tried to get underneath the same umbrella of a medical director so that it's the same treatment throughout the county. But yeah, it varies widely depending on which area. Issues your offline or your standing orders. Know that word, know the definition of offline. It's just meaning stuff that's written down that you can do without having to call in and ask for permission. Most of ours are standing orders. But on the basic, when we start doing your hands-on stuff, this is where it gets confusing, is for the National Registry, it's all online, meaning you can't help that patient until your medical direction or your medical director has gave you permission to. So don't confuse those two things. Offline is written, you don't have to call in to get it. Online, you have to call in and get directions. So our EMS role in public health, injury prevention is a big one. Same with youth. We already hit on that too. The geriatric patients, so our elderly, nursing homes, things like that. Public vaccination programs. Like right now, we've been asked multiple times by our Department of Health to come and help with the COVID vaccinations. We do flu shots. If you guys want to do your advanced stuff, that's a great opportunity too, because you're literally giving shots all day long. So it's a great, no, it's a voluntary part, but they just ask for help and you guys can come help them. Like for you guys on basics, you do your patient assessments and you watch them for 15 minutes afterwards to make sure there's no allergic reaction or to it. Disease for surveillance too. If we're starting to see a lot of calls that are showing COVID or pneumonia or any other things like that, we're one of the first ones to start seeing it and making that connection. So there's two different ways of researching EMS. Guys, I am a huge, I hate the make sure. So there's two ways that research affects EMS. It focuses on improving patient outcomes. The AHA is the one that always comes to mind for this. And it's really changed how we do CPR. And it's usually through evidence-based techniques. They take our reports and see what treatments we did and what the outcome of the patient was. So the evidence-based process, we got to form a hypothesis, right? What is it we're thinking is going to happen? Review the literature, evaluate the evidence, and then adapt it to practice if the evidence supports us. This one, a lot of the times, is where people, if we've been in it long enough and we don't stay up with the evidence-based part of it, we get lost and the treatments will outrun us. The one that, and it goes back to CPR, the example that I can give you guys is, we used to, with CPR, it was do compressions, load and go, and get them to the hospital. Well, what the AHA found out is those agencies that weren't doing that were working them in the field, that were not trying to just get them out the door into the hospital, were having a much, much higher success rate than those who were loading them and going. A lot of hospitals and a lot of things push back on that, but the research just supported that. The other thing too, though, guys, is that AHA is a great one, but there's a lot of other ones too, that it's just not created equally, right? There's different protocols that they have to meet, in my opinion, to make it credible too. So like the American Heart Association, some of those guys that are great big organizations that have spent a lot of time and money in this are great ones to do it. There's some others that are not. Rely on the scientific method, meaning it has to be reproducible, right? They're tested to prove or disprove the hypothesis. The other one too, guys, is peer review, research in medical journals. Those ones are, a lot of the times that's your doctor part of it too. The EMS articles and magazines, where we get a lot of them. The hard part with it though is, remember, it's not original research, and a lot of the times it's not peer reviewed. So throughout this course though too, guys, we're going to talk about some local issues. We teach to the bare minimum, but just understand the other part of EMS is that there is local agencies, there's local protocols like we've hit that way too, okay? The other two administrative matters too, there's talking like we haven't already did this. We have class meeting times, and then we already hit on the recertification process. Know for you guys in the state of Utah, the NRAMT is the ones that you do your recertification through, and then they send it to the state. And they are a stickler on their deadline. If it says March 31st at midnight, if it isn't in there by March 31st at midnight, you get a retest. Meaning you gotta go do the written test. And if you go over a year, you got to do the course all over. But you also have 6 months prior to your recertification date to do it. So in 18 months after you pass the class, you can start your recertification process. I strongly, strongly, strongly suggest you do it, because sometimes it can be a pain in the butt. Don't wait till the last night. The other hard part that comes with it, if you wait till the last day or two to try and get any help from them, you're one of, I mean, this is a huge organization, and they set the March 31st deadline or the September one, and you're one of 10,000 people trying to get recertified. And so wait times are just atrocious to talk to somebody or get some help. So don't put it off. Some other things we have to deal with: the American Disabilities Act, preserving the rights of Americans with disabilities, meaning that you have to meet certain criteria, the lifting or whatever, but also just because you have disabilities doesn't necessarily mean that you can't be an EMT. There's just some restrictions that come with it. Okay. All right. Give me about 5 minutes, guys. What time is it?
7:20.
So we'll start up at 7:30 again on chapter 2.